"Excuse me, but I believe you're in our seat." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, sharp and charged with expectation. Dr. Imani Bridges didn't look up immediately. She was finishing an email on her phone, a final confirmation to the symposium organizers. She took a slow sip of her water, then turned her calm, intelligent eyes toward the man standing in the aisle. "I'm sorry?" she asked, her tone even. "Our seat," he repeated, jabbing a thick finger at his ticket. "2A and 2B. You're in 2A. Dr. Bridges offered a small, polite smile. Misunderstandings happened. "I believe you'll find that 2A is my seat." She held up her own boarding pass on her phone screen, the details clear. "Bridges, I seat 2A. The man's wife, platinum blonde diamonds glittering, let out a sharp sigh. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Bradford. Let's not have a scene. Just get the attendant." She didn't mean an attendant. She meant staff. Someone to remove the problem. Someone to reset the natural order. Because in the sterile, climate-controlled world of first-class air travel, some rules are written in booking terms and others are etched in the cold glare of privilege. For Dr. Imani Bridges, her ticket was for seat 2A, a window seat in the celestial premier cabin of Horizon Airlines Flight 842. But for the wealthy couple who wanted her seat, her ticket was irrelevant. They saw only the color of her skin and decided she didn't belong. Dr. Imani Bridges was exhausted. The past 72 hours had been a grueling inspection blitz at Horizon Airlines' JFK maintenance facility, a necessary but draining deep dive into the guts of modern aviation. At 42, she had spent 15 years with the Federal Aviation Administration, working her way up from systems engineer to her current position as senior airworthiness inspector. Tonight, she was finally headed to London for the annual Global Aerospace Safety Symposium, where she was the keynote speaker. All she wanted was 7 hours of peace cocooned in the plush leather of seat 2A. She had booked this seat 6 months in advance, using a combination of saved miles and her own hard-earned money. It was a rare indulgence. Usually, she was content in premium economy, but the brutal schedule leading up to the conference demanded she arrive rested and sharp. Her journey to this moment had been anything but easy. After earning her aerospace engineering degree from MIT, Imani had faced a constant stream of subtle and not-so-subtle barriers. The raised eyebrows when she walked into meeting rooms, the assumptions that she was there to take notes rather than lead the discussion, the helpful suggestions to consider more suitable career paths. But Imani had persevered, driven by a personal mission that few understood. 8 years ago, she had lost her husband Marcus in a cargo plane accident. The official report cited pilot error, but Imani's own investigation had uncovered a pattern of maintenance irregularities that had been overlooked. The airline had quietly settled, the FAA had implemented new inspection protocols, and Imani had found her true calling, ensuring that no one else would lose a loved one to preventable aviation failures. Now she was a single mother to Nia, a brilliant 21-year-old following in her footsteps at MIT. Their weekly video calls were an anchor in Imani's often chaotic schedule. Just last night, Nia had wished her mother good luck at the conference, proudly announcing she'd been selected for an aerospace internship. "You're paving the way for me, Mom," she had said. "Every time they underestimate you and you prove them wrong, it makes it a little easier for all of us." Those words had warmed Imani's heart even as they reminded her of the burden she carried not just for herself, but for her daughter and all the young women who would come after. As she settled into seat 2A, the supple leather cool against her back, she let out a sigh that felt like it carried the weight of the entire past week. She stowed her carry-on, a well-worn leather briefcase containing her laptop and presentation notes, in the overhead bin, and placed her smaller bag under the seat in front of her. She was dressed in comfortable but professional travel attire, tailored navy trousers, a cream silk blouse, and a charcoal blazer that spoke of quiet authority. Her hair was styled in elegant twists that cascaded over one shoulder. She looked to anyone paying attention like a woman who knew exactly where she was supposed to be. The boarding process continued its choreographed chaos around her as Imani typed a final note on her phone. The celestial premier cabin of Horizon Airlines' Boeing 787 Dreamliner was a carefully crafted cocoon of luxury. Soft LED lighting shifted from lavender to amber, designed to ease jet lag and soothe travel-frayed nerves. The cabin had that distinctive new plane smell, a blend of leather carpet cleaner and the faintest hint of jet fuel that somehow never quite disappeared. The scent of Clive Christian perfume mingled with the clean smell of cabin air as a flight attendant moved gracefully through the aisle. Crystal glasses clinked softly as pre-departure champagne service began. "Still water, please," Imani said when offered a flute. She wanted to stay hydrated and clear-headed for London. As she waited, her mind drifted back to a conference in Singapore 4 years earlier. She had arrived early, her credentials and confirmation in hand, only to be directed to the service entrance by a staff member who couldn't reconcile her appearance with her position. "The speakers enter through the main door," he had said pointedly, assuming she was support staff. Imani had calmly produced her keynote speaker badge. The man's face had registered shock, then embarrassment followed quickly by a defensive hostility that suggested she was somehow at fault for his mistake. It was a familiar progression. "Dr. Bridges." A warm voice interrupted her thoughts. A flight attendant with a name tag reading Sophia Alvarez stood beside her seat. "I noticed you declined the champagne. Would you prefer still water or perhaps tea before takeoff?" Sophia's manner was different, professional without condescension, attentive without assumption. Imani smiled gratefully. "Water would be wonderful, thank you." "Of course. Are you traveling to London for business or pleasure?" Sophia asked as she poured the water into a glass. "Business. I'm speaking at the Global Aerospace Safety Symposium." "That sounds important," Sophia said, genuine interest in her voice. "It is. This year we're focusing on new inspection protocols for composite airframes." "Not exactly casual dinner conversation," Imani added with a small laugh. Sophia smiled. "Well, if it helps keep planes in the air where they belong, it sounds pretty important to me." As Sophia moved to the next passenger, Imani opened her tablet to review her presentation one last time. Proactive Implementation of Airworthiness Directives, Closing the Gap Between Regulation and Reality. The title was dry, but the content was vital, analyzing how airlines could better incorporate safety directives into their operations before incidents occurred. Imani's mind was already in London, rehearsing key points and anticipating questions when the voice cut through her concentration. "Excuse me, but I believe you're in our seat." Bradford Thompson was not accustomed to waiting. At 58, he had built Thompson Venture Capital into a billion-dollar fund through a combination of sharp instincts and sharper elbows. His receding silver hair was expertly cut to minimize his baldness, his bespoke suit concealing the paunch that his personal trainer hadn't managed to eliminate despite 3 sessions a week. Next to him stood his wife Elaine, a carefully preserved 52. Her blonde hair was a helmet of perfection, her face a testament to the finest surgeons in New York. The diamond earrings, catching the cabin light with aggressive fire, had been an anniversary gift, a peace offering after Bradford's second affair had made the gossip columns. They moved through the first-class cabin not as passengers, but as conquerors surveying their domain. Their eyes skimmed over the other passengers, making instant assessments, nods of recognition for those deemed worthy, dismissal for those who weren't. Bradford glanced down at his gold-embossed ticket holder, then back at Imani, annoyance flickering across his face. Elaine didn't bother with such subtlety. Her gaze swept over Imani from head to toe, a silent, dismissive inventory that lingered on her twists and her dark skin before dismissing her entirely. "Our seats," Bradford repeated, making a show of examining his boarding pass again. "2A and 2B. My wife and I always sit together. I specifically booked these seats." Imani maintained her calm expression, though she could feel a familiar tension beginning to build at the base of her neck. "As I mentioned, this is my assigned seat. Perhaps you have row 3. Bradford's face flushed slightly. I know what I booked. I've been Diamond Elite for 15 years. He emphasized the status level as though it were a royal title. I never sit anywhere but the front row. Perhaps we should check with the flight attendant, Imani suggested reasonably, though she knew her seat assignment was correct. She had triple-checked it, as she did with all details of professional habit that had served her well. Bradford's jaw tightened at the implication that he might be wrong. He turned away from Imani, scanning for a flight attendant as though searching for a servant who had wandered off duty. Bradford, just get someone to fix this. Elaine sighed, adjusting her Hermes scarf with manicured fingers. We're holding up the line. Indeed, other first-class passengers were beginning to queue behind them, their expressions a mixture of impatience and curiosity. A silver-haired man in an expensive suit checked his watch pointedly. A younger executive typed furiously on his phone, probably complaining about the delay on social media. Bradford raised his hand, snapping his fingers twice, a gesture so nakedly imperious that several nearby passengers winced. Attendant, we need assistance here. Sophia, who had been helping an elderly passenger stow her bag, looked over with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was clearly accustomed to this type of summoning, but not appreciative of it. I'll be right with you, sir, she said politely, finishing her current task first. This small assertion of priority helping the elderly passenger before responding to Bradford's snap seemed to further irritate him. His face reddened slightly as he turned back to Imani. This will be sorted out in a moment, he said with the absolute confidence of a man unaccustomed to being contradicted. You should prepare to move your things. Imani took a slow sip of her water, letting the cold liquid cool the heat of frustration rising within her. This was a familiar dance, the assumption that she was in the wrong space, that her presence was a mistake to be corrected, rather than a right to be respected. Sir, I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly but firmly. This is my assigned seat. I selected it months ago. I checked in online 24 hours in advance to confirm it. If there is a booking error, it isn't on my part. Bradford opened his mouth to respond, but at that moment another flight attendant approached, not Sophia, but a younger blonde woman whose name tag read Jennifer Hudson. Is there a problem here? Jennifer asked, her voice instantly deferential as she looked at Bradford and Elaine, recognizing the visual markers of wealth and privilege. Yes. Elaine cut in before either Bradford or Imani could speak. This person is in my husband's seat. We are in 2A and 2B. Jennifer's professional smile faltered for a microsecond as she looked at Imani. It was a fleeting but unmistakable shift, a swift, ugly calculation made visible. She saw a black woman sitting alone in a seat often occupied by passengers like Bradford Thompson. The conclusion was simple. Ma'am, Jennifer began, turning to Imani, her tone now syrupy sweet but laced with steel. Could I please see your boarding pass? Imani showed it to her just as she had to Bradford. Jennifer glanced at it, her brow furrowing in momentary confusion. It clearly showed Bridgeswana's seat 2A. She then looked at the Thompsons' tickets. They also said 2A and 2B, a double booking. It was a rare but straightforward airline error, usually solved by checking the master manifest and reseating one party, often with a generous upgrade or compensation. But Jennifer didn't see a simple error. She saw a problem, and she had already decided on the path of least resistance. It seems there's been a little mix-up in the system, Jennifer said, her voice directed at the Thompsons, but her eyes flicking toward Imani. Not to worry, we'll get it sorted right away. She turned back to Imani, her smile tightening. Ma'am, we have a lovely seat for you in our premium economy cabin. It's very comfortable. We'll just move you back there so Mr. and Mrs. Thompson can take their seats. It wasn't a request. It was an instruction. Imani was being told to move not because of a neutral system error, but because the assumption had been made that she was the one who was out of place. The Thompsons were the immovable objects. She was the inconvenience to be cleared away. No, thank you, Imani said, her voice quiet but firm. I'm quite comfortable here. This is the seat I selected and paid for. If there's a double booking, I trust you'll find another seat for Mr. and Mrs. Thompson." Jennifer's smile vanished completely. "Ma'am, we need to resolve this so we can depart on time. The Thompsons are our Diamond Elite members. The system should have protected their seating." The implication was clear. Their status trumped her ticket. "I'm also a Diamond Elite member," Imani stated calmly, though it was irrelevant to the principle of the matter, "and I am in my assigned seat. I'm not moving." Elaine scoffed loudly, ensuring the nearby passengers could hear. "This is ridiculous. Bradford, do something." Bradford puffed out his chest. "Listen here," he said, leaning over Imani, invading her personal space. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing or if you got this ticket on some kind of discount program or employee pass, but we are sitting here now. Are you going to move, or do I need to have the captain come out here and make you move?" The threat hung in the air, thick and ugly. Whispers from the surrounding seats began to ripple through the cabin. Imani felt a familiar, weary anger begin to coil in her stomach. It was a feeling she'd had to swallow countless times in her life in boardrooms, at academic conferences, and now in a first-class airline cabin. It was the exhaustion of having to constantly prove her right to exist in spaces others felt they owned. "That won't be necessary," Imani said, her gaze unwavering. She looked past Bradford directly at the flight attendant. "I've given you my answer. I will not be vacating my assigned seat. You need to find a solution that does not involve me giving up what is rightfully mine." Jennifer's face hardened. She saw not a passenger asserting her rights, but a problem passenger. "Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate, you will be in violation of crew member instructions. We will have to deplane you." The final humiliating card had been played. Move down or get off. Imani stared at the three faces before her. Bradford's smug entitlement, Elaine's cold disdain, and Jennifer's brittle, bureaucratic hostility. They had made their assumptions. They had drawn their lines, and they had no idea who they were dealing with. A slow, cold resolve washed over Imani, extinguishing the flicker of anger and replacing it with something far more formidable: professional duty. "Very well," she said, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper, yet it cut through the cabin noise like a razor. "I think it's time you get the captain." The standoff had drawn attention from the entire cabin. A middle-aged Hispanic businessman in row 4, his seat back just far enough to afford a clear view of the confrontation, watched with an uncomfortable expression. His name tag identified him as Miguel Reyes, VP of Engineering at a tech company. He had noticed Imani earlier during boarding, giving her the subtle nod that professionals of color often exchanged in predominantly white spaces, a small acknowledgement of shared experience. Now he shifted uneasily, clearly torn between the instinct to speak up and the desire to avoid conflict. Jennifer returned with the chief purser, a middle-aged woman named Vanessa Kelly, who approached with the weary efficiency of someone who had mediated countless passenger disputes. "What seems to be the issue?" she asked, looking between Imani and the Thompsons. Before Jennifer could speak, Imani explained calmly. "There appears to be a double booking for seat 2A. I booked this seat months ago and confirmed it yesterday. Mr. Thompson believes it's his seat. Rather than check the master reservation system, your colleague immediately asked me to move to premium economy without offering the same option to the Thompsons." Vanessa's eyes flicked to Jennifer, who stiffened defensively. "The Thompsons are Diamond Elite members," Jennifer insisted. "They always sit in the front row." "I understand," Vanessa said carefully, "but we need to check the booking timestamps." She pulled out a tablet and began tapping on the screen. Bradford Thompson's patience, already thin, snapped completely. "This is outrageous. I've flown over 2 million miles with Horizon. I'm on a first-name basis with your CEO. This entire situation is beneath me." Elaine, perhaps sensing the purser might not immediately capitulate, decided to escalate further. "I don't feel comfortable sitting next to someone who's being so hostile." she said loudly. "She's creating a scene." Imani, who had not raised her voice once, looked at Elaine with calm bewilderment. "I'm sitting quietly in my assigned seat. If anyone is creating a scene, it's not me." "You see," Elaine said to Vanessa, "that tone, very aggressive." The accusation was so blatantly false that Miguel Reyes, still watching from row 4, let out an audible scoff. Jennifer noticed and shot him a warning look, but the damage was done. Other passengers were beginning to murmur amongst themselves, and not all were taking the Thompsons' side. An elderly woman diagonally across the aisle was frowning disapprovingly at Bradford. Vanessa looked uncomfortable as she studied her tablet. "I can see that Dr. Bridges booked this seat 182 days ago," she said finally. "Mr. Thompson, your booking was made 73 days ago." "That's irrelevant," Bradford snapped. "We're Diamond Elite Plus. Our seats should be protected." "Even Diamond status doesn't override prior bookings, sir," Vanessa explained carefully. "It seems the system failed to flag this as a duplicate assignment." "So fix it," Elaine demanded. "Move her." "Ma'am, Dr. Bridges has the earlier booking," Vanessa said, a note of finality in her voice. "We can offer you seats in row 3 which are identical to—" "Unacceptable," Bradford interrupted. "I have a medical condition that requires me to sit in row 1 or 2 for legroom. It's documented in my profile." Imani doubted this very much, but remained silent, watching as Bradford Thompson manufactured a medical necessity out of wounded pride. Jennifer, seeing Vanessa wavering, pressed her advantage. "Perhaps Dr. Bridges would be willing to move as a courtesy. We could offer compensation, of course." The phrasing was telling. Now, it wasn't about rules or bookings or even status. It was about Imani being asked to be courteous, to voluntarily give up her rightful place to accommodate the desires of the wealthy white couple. "I decline," Imani said simply. "So stubborn," Elaine muttered loud enough to be heard. "Some people just want to make a point." "What exactly would that point be, Mrs. Thompson?" Imani asked, her voice level, but her eyes sharp. The question hung in the air, dangerous in its directness. Elaine flushed but didn't answer. Vanessa, sensing the situation deteriorating, made an executive decision. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, we can offer you seats in row 3 or 2 single seats in rows 1 and 2. Those are our options at this time." Bradford's face turned an alarming shade of red. "This is how you treat your top customers. Get me the captain. Now." Vanessa hesitated, then nodded to Jennifer. "Inform Captain Wilson we have a situation in the cabin." As Jennifer hurried toward the cockpit, Bradford Thompson loomed over Imani's seat. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Imani met his gaze steadily. "Neither do you, Mr. Thompson," she replied. "Neither do you." The walk from the cockpit to the Celestial Premier cabin was short, but for Captain James Wilson it was an unwelcome journey. Delays were his enemy. Every minute the aircraft sat at the gate was a minute ticked against his on-time performance statistics, a metric by which his career was measured. The message from the cabin crew had been vague but insistent: seating dispute in row 2, Diamond Elite passengers involved. In his 30 years with Horizon Airlines, Wilson had seen it all. In his experience, these situations were almost always caused by someone feeling entitled to something they hadn't paid for. He emerged from behind the cockpit door, a figure of immediate authority. His uniform was crisp, his silver hair neatly combed, and his expression one of stern impatience. Jennifer met him halfway, her face a mask of anxious relief. "Captain, thank you for coming out," she said in a hushed, urgent tone. "It's Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, our Diamond Elite Plus members. There was a system glitch and their seat 2A was also assigned to another passenger." She gestured toward Imani. "She's refusing to move. Vanessa offered her premium economy, but she's being difficult." Captain Wilson's eyes followed Jennifer's gesture. He saw Imani sitting calmly by the window. He saw the Thompsons standing in the aisle. Bradford's face a dangerous shade of purple with contained rage, Elaine tapping her foot with the rhythmic impatience of a metronome. He absorbed the scene in a single practiced glance, a well-dressed, powerful-looking white couple and a black woman sitting alone. Like Jennifer, his mind, conditioned by years of unconscious bias, took the path of least resistance. He made a snap judgment. He strode over his presence, immediately commanding the attention of the entire cabin. He bypassed Imani and addressed Bradford directly. "Mr. Thompson, Captain Wilson, my apologies for this inconvenience. We seem to have a computer error, but I assure you we'll have you in your seats momentarily." It was a promise, a clear signal of whose side he was on. He then turned to Imani. His tone shifted, losing the warmth it had held for Bradford and gaining a patronizing edge. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Wilson. I understand there's been some confusion with your seat." "There's no confusion, Captain," Imani replied, her voice steady. She met his gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated. "This is my assigned seat. Your airline appears to have double booked it. That is an issue for your staff to resolve with Mr. and Mrs. Thompson." The captain's jaw tightened. This was not the quick, compliant resolution he had expected. "My flight attendant has offered you an alternative seat in our premium economy cabin. As a gesture of goodwill for the mix-up, we can also offer you a travel voucher for a future flight." "A gesture of goodwill would be honoring my ticket," Imani countered. "Downgrading me for your airline's mistake is not goodwill, it's a penalty. I'm flying to London to speak at a conference. I require the space and ability to rest that this particular seat provides, which is why I booked and paid for it. I will not be moving to premium economy." Her calm, articulate refusal seemed to infuriate the captain more than an outburst would have. It was the calm of someone who believed they were utterly in the right, and it challenged his absolute authority on his aircraft. Captain Wilson was unused to being challenged, especially by passengers. In the hierarchy of air travel, the captain's word was law. He had removed unruly passengers before drunk businessmen, belligerent college students, and had never lost a moment's sleep over it. But something about this woman's composed defiance made him hesitate. In that moment of hesitation, memories flickered through Imani's mind, a conference in Detroit where security had been called because she'd attempted to enter the VIP speaker's lounge, a first-class lounge in Dallas where the attendant had assumed she was lost, a board meeting where she'd been mistaken for the administrative assistant. Each time she had maintained her dignity. Each time she had stood her ground. Each time she had prevailed. This was just one more battlefield in an endless war. "Ma'am," Captain Wilson said, his voice dropping low, taking on a hard, non-negotiable edge. "Let me be perfectly clear. This aircraft is under my command. Federal regulations state that you must obey the instructions of the flight crew. My crew has instructed you to move. Your refusal to do so is now a security issue. It is interfering with the duties of the crew and preventing the safe and timely departure of this flight." The words "security issue" were a deliberate escalation, a piece of verbal artillery designed to shock a difficult passenger into submission. The surrounding passengers fell silent, their earlier whispers replaced by wide-eyed stares. This was no longer a simple seating dispute. It was a confrontation. Elaine Thompson seized the opportunity, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. "You hear that? You're a security risk. They're going to have you arrested." Imani ignored her completely. Her focus remained laser-sharp on Captain Wilson. She recognized his tactic for what it was, a baseless threat, a misuse of his authority to solve a customer service problem. He was cornering her, attempting to humiliate her into compliance. "Captain," she said, her voice remaining perfectly calm, "are you truly invoking FAA regulations regarding crew interference over a seating assignment error made by your own company?" "I am telling you the consequences of your actions," he retorted, his face now grim. "You have two options. You can accept the seat in premium economy and we can all get on our way. Or you can refuse, at which point I will have you removed from my aircraft by airport security." He paused for effect. The choice is yours. You have 1 minute to decide. It was the final, brutal ultimatum. Submit to the injustice or be publicly shamed and ejected. The Thompsons looked on with triumphant smiles. Jennifer stood behind her captain, nodding in solemn agreement. The power of the entire airline embodied in this one man was being brought to bear against her. From the cockpit door, First Officer Nathan Garcia watched the confrontation with growing discomfort. At 36, he was still relatively new to flying wide-body aircraft, having been promoted to international routes just 8 months ago. Captain Wilson was a legend at Horizon, respected, feared, and known for running a tight ship. Nathan had learned not to question Wilson's decisions, at least not publicly, but something about this situation felt wrong. The passenger in 2A didn't fit the profile of a troublemaker. She was calm, articulate, and clearly familiar with airline procedures, and Wilson's invocation of security protocols over a seating dispute seemed excessive. Wilson glanced back, catching Nathan's eye silently commanding him to return to the cockpit. Nathan hesitated, then reluctantly retreated behind the door. He left it slightly ajar, listening. In the cabin, the standoff continued. Imani looked out the small, thick window of the Dreamliner. She saw the ground crew moving on the tarmac below the blinking lights of a fuel truck, the vast, complex ecosystem of the airport operating around them. Her whole life had been dedicated to this world, not the customer-facing glamour of it, but the hidden critical framework that held it all together. The physics of lift, the metallurgy of turbine blades, the intricate dance of hydraulics and avionics, and above all, the unforgiving web of regulations that separated safe passage from catastrophe. Captain Wilson was using those regulations as a bludgeon. He was about to discover that she knew them better than he did, not just the text, but the intent, the history, and the full crushing weight of their enforcement. She took a slow, deliberate breath, centering herself. The anger was gone. The frustration had evaporated. All that remained was a cold, clear sense of purpose. He had given her an ultimatum. Now she would give him one of her own. "Your minute is up," Wilson said, checking his watch for effect. "What's it going to be?" Imani turned back from the window, her eyes meeting his. The hint of a polite smile had vanished from her face, replaced by an expression of profound seriousness. The passenger was gone. Dr. Imani Bridges was now on the clock. "Captain Wilson," she began, her voice changing subtly, acquiring a new resonance of command. "Before I answer your ultimatum, I have a few questions for you regarding the airworthiness of this aircraft." A wave of confusion washed over the faces of Captain Wilson and Jennifer. The Thompsons looked momentarily baffled, their triumphant expressions faltering. The sudden bizarre pivot in the conversation threw everyone off balance. "The airworthiness," Captain Wilson repeated, his voice thick with disbelief and annoyance. "Ma'am, what are you talking about? This is a brand new 787. It is perfectly safe." "I'm sure it is," Imani said, her tone meticulously neutral. "But perfection in design doesn't preclude errors in maintenance. I'd like to know about the sign-off on the hydraulic actuator for the starboard-outboard flap. There was a replacement noted in the maintenance log this morning. Can you confirm that the final torque check was verified by a second certified engineer and logged in accordance with FAA Directive 2023-22-15? Silence. A thick, heavy silence descended upon their small corner of the plane. Captain Wilson's face, which had been a mask of command, now registered a flicker of genuine shock. Jennifer stared, her mouth slightly agape. This was not the language of a disgruntled passenger. This was the language of the industry, specific and technical. Bradford Thompson, recovering his bluster, scoffed. "What on earth is she babbling about? Just get her off the plane." Imani didn't even glance at him. Her eyes were locked on the captain. "The directive is quite specific, Captain. Following the incidents with the actuator failures on the 787-9 variant, it mandates a dual signature verification for any hydraulic component replacement on primary flight control surfaces. I happened to be reviewing the logs for this aircraft's tail number November 787 Alpha uniform earlier today as part of a random audit. I noted the entry for the actuator replacement, but I did not see the required secondary signature. Captain Wilson's face was losing its color. The tail number. She knew the aircraft's registration number. She knew about a specific maintenance action performed just hours ago, and she was quoting a Federal Aviation Administration directive by heart. The blood drained from his face. The carefully constructed power dynamic of the past 10 minutes shattered into a million pieces. Who are you?" He stammered, the authority in his voice completely gone, replaced by a dawning, sickening dread. "My question first, Captain," Imani replied steadily. "The dual signature verification for the actuator. Can you confirm it was properly executed?" Captain Wilson's mind raced. He had reviewed the aircraft logbook during pre-flight as was standard procedure. He remembered seeing the entry about the flap actuator replacement, but had he specifically checked for the second signature, he couldn't recall. Like most pilots, he relied on the maintenance sign-off system. If the aircraft was released to service, he assumed all procedures had been followed. I would need to check the maintenance log," he admitted, his voice noticeably weaker. "Please do," Imani said. "I'll wait." The dynamics in the cabin had shifted completely. The Thompsons, sensing the change but not understanding its cause, looked confused and increasingly uncomfortable. Jennifer had backed away slightly, her earlier confidence evaporating. Miguel Reyes, watching from row 4, had set aside his initial discomfort and was now observing with undisguised interest. Whatever was happening, it was clear that the woman in 2A was not who anyone had assumed she was. Captain Wilson hesitated, then turned to Jennifer. "Get the maintenance log from the flight deck, quickly." As Jennifer hurried to comply, Bradford Thompson's patience finally snapped. "This is absurd," he exploded. "We're being held hostage by some random person making technical claims. I demand that you remove her immediately." His voice had risen to a shout, causing several passengers to flinch. An infant in row 5 began to cry. Captain Wilson, still visibly shaken, turned to Bradford. "Sir, please lower your voice. We're handling the situation." "Handling it," Bradford sputtered. "You're capitulating to her. Do you know who I am?" "Bradford," Elaine hissed, tugging at his sleeve. Something in her husband's tone had alarmed her. This was no longer the controlled aggression he used to intimidate subordinates. This was a full-blown tantrum, and it was attracting exactly the kind of attention they normally went to great lengths to avoid. "I'm calling Vincent right now." Bradford continued, pulling out his phone and waving it. "Let's see what your CEO has to say about this treatment." Imani remained silent, watching the meltdown with clinical detachment. She had seen this before, the desperate flailing of privilege when it encountered an immovable obstacle. Jennifer returned with the maintenance log, a thick binder filled with detailed entries and sign-offs. She handed it to Captain Wilson, who began flipping through the pages with nervous haste. "Page 42, this morning's entry," Imani supplied helpfully. "Actuator replacement performed by Technician Rodriguez." Wilson found the page. His face fell further as he scanned the entry. The primary technician had signed off on the work, but the required secondary verification signature was indeed missing. It was a clear violation of the airworthiness directive. There seems to be a discrepancy," he admitted reluctantly. "A discrepancy," Imani echoed. "Captain, that's a regulatory violation. The aircraft is technically not airworthy until that signature is obtained." The implications hit Wilson like a physical blow. If what she was saying was true and the evidence was right there in black and white, they couldn't legally depart. But who was this woman to make such a determination? "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but..." "Captain Wilson," Imani interrupted, her voice now carrying an unmistakable tone of authority. "I think it's time we clarified who I am." She reached into her personal bag at her feet. She didn't move from her seat. She simply retrieved a small, unassuming black wallet. She flipped it open, revealing not a driver's license or a credit card, but a laminated piece of government identification. The gold eagle of the United States Department of Transportation gleamed under the cabin lights. She held it up for him to see. "My name is Dr. Imani Bridges. I am a senior airworthiness inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration Airworthiness Directive Compliance Unit. My job is to ensure that every aircraft I step on is in full compliance with federal safety regulations. For the past 72 hours, I have been leading the team conducting a surprise audit of your airline's JFK maintenance facility." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The cabin felt like a vacuum. The clinking of glasses had stopped. The ambient chatter had died. Everyone was listening. "When you and your flight attendant threatened to have me removed from my seat for your airline's clerical error," she continued, her gaze as sharp and precise as a scalpel, "I was a passenger. But when you, the captain in command, invoked FAA regulations to threaten me, you made it a professional matter. You have demonstrated a willingness to misuse safety regulations for customer management. That calls your judgment into question, and it forces me to act not as a passenger, but as a federal agent." She put her identification away, the snap of the wallet echoing in the stunned silence. "So I will ask you again, Captain Wilson. Can you personally vouch for the dual signature verification on that actuator replacement? Because if you can't, then my earlier observation of the logbook stands. And as an FAA inspector, I now have reason to believe that this aircraft may not be in compliance with an active airworthiness directive. Which means, Captain, that as of this moment, this aircraft is not cleared for flight." The Thompsons stared, their faces a comical mixture of horror and utter incomprehension. Bradford's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Elaine looked as if she had been slapped. Jennifer, the flight attendant, had gone deathly pale, her hand flying to her mouth as the catastrophic scale of her misjudgment crashed down upon her. Captain Wilson looked as though he had been punched in the gut. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The woman he had threatened to have dragged off the plane held the power to end his flight and potentially his career. He had picked a fight not with a passenger, but with the regulator herself. He had tried to use the rule book as a weapon, only to find out she was the one who had written it. The ultimatum he had issued moments ago seemed like a distant, foolish echo. Now there was only one authority in the cabin of Horizon Airlines Flight 842, and she was sitting quietly in Seat 2A. The cockpit of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner is a sanctuary of calm professionalism, a space where checklists and procedures govern every action. But the atmosphere inside the cockpit of Flight 842 was now anything but calm. Captain Wilson stumbled back through the door. First Officer Garcia looked up from his pre-flight checks with concern. "What's going on, James?" "The gate agent is calling, asking about the delay." Wilson sank into his seat, running a hand over his face. He looked pale, shaken. "Shut the door," he rasped. Garcia did as he was told, the heavy door clicking shut, muffling the sounds of the cabin. "Okay, what's happened?" "The seating dispute. The woman in 2A. Wilson began, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's FAA. Garcia's eyes widened. "What like from the local office?" "No." Wilson said the word, coming out choked. "Worse. Much worse. Airworthiness Directive Compliance Unit. She was auditing our MRO all weekend. She knows the tail number. She's asking about the sign-off on the starboard flap actuator we had replaced last night." The color drained from Garcia's face as well. Every pilot knew what that meant. The AD Compliance Unit was the FAA's elite squad of technical enforcers. They were the people you never, ever wanted to see unless it was a scheduled visit. A surprise audit was bad enough. Having one of their lead inspectors on your flight, a flight you were now holding at the gate, Because you'd threatened to remove her over a seating squabble, it was a career-ending nightmare. The logbook, Garcia said, his mind racing. Did they get the dual sig? No. Wilson snapped his panic, turning to anger. I'm the pilot, not the mechanic. I see the green light on my panel. I trust the paperwork is done. I signed the aircraft acceptance form based on the maintenance chief's signature. She says she saw the log and the second signature wasn't there. If she's right, Garcia pressed, understanding the terrifying implications. We're in violation of a major AD. Flying the plane in that condition would be a federal violation. Get maintenance on the radio now, Wilson commanded. Get Rodriguez the lead mechanic from the night shift. I want him to physically pull the paper log, not the digital summary, the actual hard copy, and confirm that second signature is on Form 8130. While Garcia got on the radio, his voice tense and clipped, Wilson had to make another even more dreadful call to Horizon's Operations Control Center, OCC. He explained the situation in clipped, jargon-filled sentences, trying to downplay the part about the seating dispute. But the OCC director on the other end was no fool. Let me get this straight, Captain. The voice on the phone crackled, dripping with managerial fury. You are holding at the gate with a full load of passengers because of a seating issue that has now escalated to a potential grounding order from an FAA inspector who was a passenger on your flight. That's the gist of it. Wilson admitted, feeling a profound sense of humiliation. And whose idea was it to confront this passenger? Wilson remained silent. The accusation hung in the air. Back in the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The Thompsons were still standing in the aisle, but their entitlement had curdled into confused fury. Bradford kept trying to catch Jennifer's eye, demanding to know what was happening, but she avoided his gaze, her face a frozen mask of terror. She was replaying the entire incident in her head, every condescending word she'd spoken to Dr. Bridges, every dismissive gesture, and with each recollection, a fresh wave of nausea washed over her. She hadn't just been rude to a passenger. She had actively instigated a conflict with a federal official who held the fate of the airline in her hands. Dr. Imani Bridges, meanwhile, remained in her seat, the very picture of composure. She had opened her laptop and was now reviewing a complex technical schematic, seemingly oblivious to the chaos she had unleashed. But she was not oblivious. She was observing. She saw the other passengers whispering their phones out, likely recording. She saw the fear in Jennifer's eyes and the dawning comprehension of the other flight attendants who now gave her a wide, respectful berth. She felt no triumph, only a deep, abiding weariness. This should never have happened. Her authority was a shield for public safety, not a sword for personal disputes. But they had forced her hand. Sophia Alvarez, the flight attendant who had first served Imani water, approached cautiously. "Dr. Bridges," she said, her voice respectful. "Can I get you anything, water, coffee?" "The water I have is fine." "Thank you, Sophia," Imani replied, using the woman's name from her name tag. It was a small gesture, but it acknowledged Sophia as a person, something Jennifer and the captain had failed to do for her. "I'm simply waiting for the captain to confirm the aircraft's compliance status." Sophia nodded. "We've been told there's a technical delay. We'll be making an announcement to the passengers shortly." "That would be wise," Imani said, her eyes returning to her screen. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, the radio in the cockpit crackled to life. It was Rodriguez, the lead mechanic. His voice was strained. "Captain, we have a problem." Wilson's heart sank. "Talk to me, Rodriguez." The digital log was closed out by the junior tech. He clicked the box for the second signature. But the supervisor Daniels, he got called away to the emergency on the A330. He never put his wet signature on the hard copy. The torque wrench verification was done, but the paperwork, it isn't complete. Rodriguez paused, then delivered the fatal blow. "Technically, Captain, the log is not in compliance with the AD." A stunning silence filled the cockpit. They were illegal. Dr. Bridges was right. She had seen the discrepancy from a cursory glance hours ago, and their entire system of checks and balances had failed to catch it before the aircraft was released for service. Captain Wilson closed his eyes. He was done. His authority had not just been unraveled, it had been vaporized. He had threatened a woman who was infinitely more powerful than he was in this context over a problem he had fundamentally misunderstood, and in doing so had exposed a critical safety failure at his own airline. He picked up the cabin address microphone, his hand trembling slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Wilson speaking. We apologize for the extended delay due to an unforeseen technical issue requiring verification on the ground. We are unable to depart at this time. We do not have an estimate for our departure. We ask for your patience as we work with our maintenance and operations teams to resolve the situation." His voice was hollow, stripped of its usual confident swagger. In seat 2A, Dr. Bridges heard the announcement and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The first phase was over. Now came the consequences. The captain's vague announcement did little to soothe the growing restlessness in the cabin. A technical issue was a common euphemism, but the passengers in the Celestial Premier cabin knew better. They had witnessed the entire drama. They had seen the confrontation, the flash of the badge, and the subsequent panic that had gripped the crew. The story was already spreading through the plane via text messages and hushed whispers across the aisles. The entitled couple in row 2 had picked a fight with the wrong woman, and somehow she had stopped the plane from taking off. For Bradford and Elaine Thompson, the situation had morphed from a satisfying power play into a waking nightmare. They were still stuck in the aisle, a human bottleneck of their own making. The flight attendants, who had previously been falling over themselves to please them, now regarded them with unconcealed animosity. They were the cause of this mess. "This is an outrage," Bradford boomed, his voice echoing in the tense cabin. He marched toward the galley, cornering Vanessa, the chief purser. "I want to know what's going on. Why are we just sitting here? And why hasn't that woman been removed?" Vanessa, whose composure was usually unflappable, turned to him with eyes of cold steel. "Sir, the delay is due to a safety inspection. That woman, as you call her, is Dr. Bridges, a federal aviation official, and I suggest you return to the aisle and lower your voice." "A federal official? Don't be absurd." Elaine scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's probably some diversity hire on a power trip." The comment was so vile, so dripping with venomous prejudice, that even a nearby passenger winced. Sophia, who was setting up a drink cart, nearly dropped a glass. Before Vanessa could respond, a new figure appeared. A man in a sharp suit, his face etched with stress, had come on board from the jet bridge. He was David Friedman, the Horizon Air Station manager for JFK, and he looked like he had just run a marathon. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice tight. "I'm David Friedman, station manager. I need you to come with me, please." "It's about time someone with sense showed up," Bradford huffed. "This whole situation is a disgrace. We demand compensation, and we want—" "You can discuss your demands in my office." Friedman cut him off his tone, leaving no room for argument. "Right now, you are interfering with a federal inspection. Please come with me." He gestured firmly toward the open aircraft door. The Thompsons, finally realizing they were no longer in control, shot a hateful glare at Imani before allowing themselves to be escorted off the plane. With the Thompsons gone, Friedman made a beeline for seat 2A. He crouched in the aisle, bringing himself to Imani's eye level in immediate posture of deference and respect. "Dr. Bridges," he said, his voice low and sincere. "David Friedman, station manager. On behalf of Horizon Airlines, I want to offer my deepest, most sincere apologies for what you have just experienced. It is inexcusable. The behavior of our crew was unprofessional and unacceptable. We will be launching a full, immediate investigation." Imani looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Friedman, your company's customer service policies are a matter for you. My concern is the violation of Airworthiness Directive 2023-22-15. "Yes, of course," Friedman said quickly. "Captain Wilson has informed me. Our maintenance supervisor is on his way to the aircraft with the physical logs. That will no longer be sufficient, Imani interrupted calmly. She folded her laptop closed. The failure was not just in the paperwork, it was institutional. A critical sign-off was missed, and the aircraft was released to the gate. The captain whose job it is to perform the final verification was unaware. He was by his own admission relying on a green light. That is not an acceptable standard of care. She reached into her bag again and pulled out her phone. She navigated to a secure application, her fingers moving with practiced speed. Mr. Friedman, as the ranking FAA official on site, I have no choice. The chain of failure is too significant to be resolved with a simple signature. Now I need to ensure this isn't a widespread procedural issue at this maintenance station. She typed for a moment and then hit send. I am issuing a formal ground stop order for this aircraft tail number November 787 Alpha uniform. It is to be taken out of service immediately and moved to a secure maintenance hangar. It will not fly again until it has been completely re-inspected under the supervision of my office. Friedman's face went ashen, but Imani wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am extending this ground stop to your entire fleet of 787s at this airport pending a full audit of all maintenance logs from the past 48 hours for compliance with all active ADs. Friedman's face went ashen. It was the nuclear option. Grounding one plane was a disaster. Grounding the entire 787 fleet at a major international hub was a catastrophe, a multi-million-dollar cataclysm of cancellations, rerouting, and reputational damage. Dr. Bridges, Imani, please, he stammered, his corporate poise shattering completely. Isn't there another way? It was one mistake. A mistake on a primary flight control surface is not one mistake. Imani countered, her voice now hard as granite. It is the very definition of an unacceptable risk. My job is to protect the flying public, not your airline's balance sheet. The order has been issued. It is now active in the FAA system. Your operations control will be receiving it momentarily. As if on cue, Captain Wilson's voice came over the cabin speakers again. This time it was trembling with defeat. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just received an official order from the Federal Aviation Administration. This flight has been canceled. I repeat, this flight has been canceled. We will be returning to the gate, where you will all need to deplane. Horizon Airlines agents will be available in the terminal to assist with rebooking. I deeply apologize for this outcome. A collective groan of despair and anger erupted from the passengers. The flight was not just delayed, it was over. In the cockpit, First Officer Garcia stared at the official notification that had just flashed on his screen. Ground stop order, FAA directive, all Horizon Air B787 aircraft, JFK. It was real. It was happening. Dr. Imani Bridges packed her laptop into her briefcase. She stood up, smoothing her blazer. The battle was over. The safety of the public had been protected. But the fallout, the bitter harvest of karma for those who had caused this incident, was only just beginning. Captain James Wilson had never felt more defeated in his 30-year flying career. The cockpit, usually his domain of absolute control, now felt like a prison cell. The official ground stop notification glared at him from the display screen, its bureaucratic language spelling professional disaster. Notice of immediate ground stop. FAA order, number GS JFK 23147. Aircraft, all Horizon Airlines. B787 fleet at JFK. Reason, airworthiness directive, compliance verification. Authority, Bridges I, Senior Airworthiness Inspector. First Officer Nathan Garcia sat in stunned silence beside him. The younger pilot had wisely kept his opinions to himself, but his expression spoke volumes. This was catastrophic not just for the flight, but potentially for the airline's entire operation. You realize what this means? Wilson finally said, his voice hollow. Every 787 we have at JFK will be grounded until she signs off on them. That's 7 aircraft. Thousands of passengers, millions in lost revenue. Garcia nodded grimly. And she has every right to do it. That AD is crystal clear on the dual signature requirement. Wilson's professional life was flashing before his eyes. The perfect safety record, the commendations, the respect of his peers. All of it potentially wiped away because he had mishandled a seating dispute and then doubled down when challenged. "I've never seen anything like this," Wilson muttered. "I've dealt with difficult passengers, medical emergencies, mechanical failures. But this..." "She wasn't being difficult," Garcia said quietly. "She was in her assigned seat." Wilson shot him a sharp look, but Garcia didn't back down. "I'm just saying, Captain. Before she revealed who she was just a passenger defending her rightful seat. You escalated it." The truth of this statement hit Wilson like a physical blow. He had been so accustomed to being the ultimate authority that he had forgotten a fundamental principle: authority must be exercised with fairness and wisdom. "I need to call my union rep," Wilson said, reaching for his phone. Garcia hesitated, then said what they were both thinking. "This isn't going away with a union rep, Captain. The AD violation is real. And now there's a cabin full of witnesses who saw you threaten to remove a federal inspector for refusing to give up her seat to accommodate Diamond Elite members." Wilson's hand froze midway to his phone. Garcia was right. This wasn't a simple disciplinary matter that could be smoothed over. This was a systemic failure with himself at the center of it. "What would you do?" Wilson asked, a note of genuine desperation in his voice. Garcia considered for a moment. "I'd start by acknowledging the mistake. All of it. The maintenance oversight, the handling of Dr. Bridges, the misuse of security protocols. Everything. Then I'd cooperate fully with whatever investigation follows." Wilson nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. His career, as he knew it, was over. The best he could hope for now was damage control. "I need to inform the crew," he said, rising from his seat. As he opened the cockpit door, the reality of what awaited him in the cabin hit home. The passengers would be angry, the crew would be demoralized, and somewhere out there, Dr. Imani Bridges would be documenting everything for what would surely be a blistering FAA report. The captain squared his shoulders and stepped through the door. It was time to face the music. In the basement level of Horizon Airlines' JFK maintenance facility, chaos reigned. Lead mechanic Anthony Rodriguez, a 45-year-old veteran with 20 years of experience, was frantically searching through file cabinets while simultaneously barking orders into a handheld radio. "I need all hands on deck every single 787 maintenance log from the past 48 hours. Now!" His voice echoed through the cavernous space, causing several junior technicians to jump. The maintenance control center, usually a place of methodical precision, had transformed into a war room. Computer screens displayed the status of every Horizon aircraft currently on the ground at JFK. 7 Boeing 787s, each worth approximately $300 million, were now officially grounded, their status indicators glowing an ominous red. Rodriguez ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, his mind racing. How had this happened? The actuator replacement was routine. The work had been performed correctly. But in the rush to meet the morning departure schedule, the final paperwork, the critical second signature, had fallen through the cracks. "I found the original work order," called out technician Sarah Patel, rushing over with a thick folder. Daniels was pulled away for the emergency on the A330 before he could sign off. Luis marked it as pending second signature in the digital system, but somehow it got cleared anyway. Rodriguez took the folder, scanning it quickly. The sequence of events was becoming clear, and it was a textbook case of how accidents happen not through one catastrophic failure, but through a series of small oversights that align in just the wrong way. "The system should have flagged it," he muttered. "The release to service should have been blocked until the AD requirements were met." "That's the thing," Sarah replied, pulling up a screen on her tablet. "Look here. Someone overrode the system. They entered a manual authorization code to clear the aircraft. Rodriguez's blood ran cold as he recognized the authorization code. It was his. "I never approved this," he said, but even as the words left his mouth, a sickening memory surfaced. Yesterday had been chaotic. A series of thunderstorms had delayed multiple aircraft, creating a maintenance backlog. He remembered signing a stack of release forms, trusting his team to have completed all the necessary checks. Had he signed off on this release without verifying the AD compliance? It was possible. And if he had, it meant he was personally responsible for this disaster. The maintenance center door burst open, and in walked Laura Phillips, the operations director, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Rodriguez, what the hell is happening? I've got 7 aircraft grounded and the CEO breathing down my neck." Rodriguez straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "We missed a dual signature requirement on an AD for the 787 fleet. FAA inspector was on board Flight 842 and caught it." "How does an FAA inspector just happen to be on that exact flight?" Phillips demanded. "She wasn't there as an inspector," Rodriguez explained. "She was a passenger who got into some kind of dispute with the cabin crew. When they threatened to remove her, she revealed she was FAA and identified the compliance issue." Phillips closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this. "So you're telling me that our captain and cabin crew picked a fight with an off-duty FAA inspector who then found a legitimate safety violation that we missed, and now our entire 787 fleet is grounded?" "That's about the size of it," Rodriguez confirmed. "This is a nightmare," Phillips said, moving to the main status board. "Do we have any idea how long this grounding will last?" "Depends on the inspector," Rodriguez replied. "We need to audit every aircraft, confirm AD compliance across the board, and then get her to sign off. Best case, 24 hours. Worst case." He trailed off, not wanting to contemplate the financial damage a week-long grounding would cause. Phillips turned to address the room. "Listen up. This is now our top priority. I want every maintenance record triple-checked. I want every AD compliance status verified and documented. If there are any other issues, any at all, I want to know about them before the FAA does. Is that clear?" A chorus of "Yes, ma'am" echoed through the center. "Rodriguez," Phillips said, lowering her voice. "You know this is going to require accountability." He nodded grimly. "I know. If it turns out I signed that release without verifying the signatures, I'll take full responsibility." "It's not just you," Phillips replied. "This is a breakdown in our entire safety culture, from the techs who didn't follow through on the signatures to the captain who apparently tried to intimidate a passenger who turned out to be FAA. We're all going to have to answer for this." Rodriguez nodded again, feeling the weight of 20 years of professional pride pressing down on him. In aviation maintenance, your reputation was everything, and his had just been severely damaged. "Let's focus on fixing the problem first," he said, turning back to the maintenance logs. "We can assign blame later." But as he dove back into the paperwork, Rodriguez knew that this incident would change everything for himself, for the airline, and for everyone involved in the confrontation with Dr. Bridges. The executive conference room at Horizon Airlines North American headquarters was deadly silent, despite the 10 people seated around the polished table. CEO Vincent Parker stared at the speakerphone in the center, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. "Run that by me again," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Slowly." Laura Phillips's voice came through the speaker, tense but clear. "At approximately 1540 hours, Dr. Imani Bridges, a senior airworthiness inspector with the FAA's AD compliance unit, issued a formal ground stop order for our entire 787 fleet at JFK. The order was initiated after she discovered a missing dual signature verification on a hydraulic actuator replacement in violation of AD 2023-22-15. "And how exactly did Dr. Bridges come to be inspecting our maintenance logs while supposedly traveling as a passenger?" Parker asked. A moment of uncomfortable silence followed. She was originally in her assigned seat in Celestial Premier Class, Phillips continued. There was a double booking error. The Thompson's Diamond Elite Plus members claimed the seat was theirs. Our cabin crew, including Captain Wilson, attempted to relocate Dr. Bridges to Premium Economy. She refused. The situation escalated to the point where Captain Wilson invoked security protocols and threatened to have her removed from the aircraft. Parker closed his eyes, visibly controlling his breathing. So our captain threatened to remove a federal regulator from her rightful seat because a high-status customer wanted it? Yes, sir. And this inspector was at JFK conducting what exactly? A surprise audit of our maintenance operation, sir. She's been there for the past 3 days. Parker's eyes opened now, burning with cold anger. So, an FAA inspector who has been auditing our maintenance procedures for 3 days was a passenger on our aircraft, discovered a legitimate safety violation after our staff tried to move her from her assigned seat, and has now grounded our entire 787 fleet at our busiest hub. That's correct, sir. The CEO finally released his grip on the table and leaned back in his chair. Who authorized the attempt to move her from her seat? Initial reports suggest Flight Service Manager Jennifer Hudson made the decision, which Captain Wilson then supported. Where are they now? Hudson has been removed from duty pending investigation. Captain Wilson is currently completing the cancellation procedures for Flight 842. Parker turned to the airline's Chief Legal Officer, Eleanor Vega. What are we looking at here legally? Vega didn't mince words. Potentially severe. Beyond the immediate operational impact, we have a discriminatory treatment complaint waiting to happen. An African-American female federal official was asked to give up her legitimately assigned seat to accommodate white Diamond Elite members. The optics are problematic. Problematic, echoed the Vice President of Public Relations, Mark Sanders. It's a PR nightmare. If this goes public, and with a cabin full of passengers with smartphones, we're looking at a major reputation crisis. Parker nodded grimly. First things first. Operations, what's the immediate impact? The VP of Operations consulted her tablet. 7 787s grounded at JFK affects 23 flights over the next 24 hours. Approximately 4,200 passengers. We're already working on rebooking options, but many will have to be accommodated overnight. And the financial hit? Initial estimate is between 4 and 6 million depending on how long the grounding lasts. That doesn't include potential reputation damage or legal settlements. Parker absorbed this, then made a decision. Here's what we're going to do. First, I want Hudson and Wilson suspended immediately with full pay pending investigation. Second, I want our best maintenance team working around the clock to audit those aircraft and fix any compliance issues. Third, Eleanor, I want you to reach out to Dr. Bridges directly with a formal apology and an offer to cooperate fully with her investigation. He paused, considering his next words carefully. And fourth, I want to be absolutely clear, we do not fight this. We don't challenge the ground stop. We don't dispute her findings. We acknowledge our mistakes, we fix them, and we use this as an opportunity to strengthen our safety culture. The executives exchanged glances. Parker wasn't known for backing down from fights, especially with regulators. This conciliatory approach was unexpected. Vincent, began the chief financial officer hesitantly, the financial impact of a full capitulation could be significant. Parker finished for him. Yes, but the impact of fighting a battle we cannot win against a federal regulator with a legitimate safety concern, that would be catastrophic. He stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. We built this airline on a reputation for safety and service. Today, we failed at both. Our priority now is to make it right, not to save face or cut costs. Is that understood? Nods circled the table. Good. Now let's get to work. And somebody get me everything we have on Dr. Imani Bridges. I want to know exactly who we're dealing with. As the executives filed out, Parker remained standing at the head of the table, staring out the window at the distant horizon. In 30 years of airline management, he had navigated fuel crises, terrorist attacks, economic downturns, and global pandemics. But this, a self-inflicted wound caused by the arrogance of his own staff. This might be the most maddening challenge yet. Because at the heart of it all was a simple truth that should never have been forgotten. Every passenger deserved respect, regardless of the color of their skin. And the fact that his airline had failed at this fundamental principle filled him with a deep, burning shame. The Thompsons were escorted to a private office in the terminal, the station manager's personal space. It was designed to handle VIP issues, discreetly soundproofed walls, comfortable leather chairs, a small bar stocked with premium spirits. Today, it felt more like an interrogation room. Bradford Thompson paced the length of the office, his expensive loafers wearing an invisible path in the plush carpet. Elaine sat rigidly in one of the chairs, her Hermes handbag clutched to her chest like armor. "This is outrageous," Bradford repeated for perhaps the 20th time. "Absolutely outrageous. I've been flying Horizon for 20 years. I've spent millions with this airline. To be treated like common criminals." "Bradford, please sit down," Elaine hissed. "You're making it worse." The door opened and David Friedman entered, his face a mask of professional neutrality. He carried a folder and what appeared to be printouts of the Thompsons' customer profiles. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he began, taking a seat behind his desk. "I want to thank you for your patience," Bradford scoffed. "Patience. We've been held hostage by your incompetent staff and some power-hungry bureaucrat. I demand to know what's going on." Friedman's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened slightly. "What's going on? Mr. Thompson is that one of our most highly respected customers, Dr. Imani Bridges, who happens to be a senior airworthiness inspector for the FAA, was harassed, belittled, and threatened with removal from her assigned seat because you insisted it was yours, despite having booked later than she did." "We are Diamond Elite Plus members," Bradford thundered. "Our seats should be protected." "Diamond Elite status does not override federal regulations, airline policies, or basic human decency," Friedman replied, his voice ice cold. Dr. Bridges was in her correctly assigned seat. She showed her boarding pass. She was polite and professional, and in return she was treated abominably by our staff at your insistence. "That woman was obstinate and deliberately difficult," Elaine cut in, her voice shrill. "She could have simply moved to another seat. Instead, she decided to throw her weight around." Friedman regarded her coolly. "Mrs. Thompson, Dr. Bridges, was under no obligation to give up her assigned seat. The fact that you believe she should have simply to accommodate your preferences speaks volumes." He opened the folder on his desk. "I have here the transcript of your interaction as reported by multiple crew members and passengers. Would you like me to read some of the comments you made?" Elaine suddenly found her manicure fascinating. "I thought not." Friedman continued. "Now here's what happens next. Flight 842 has been canceled. Not just delayed canceled. In fact, our entire 787 fleet at JFK has been grounded by the FAA due to a legitimate safety concern that Dr. Bridges identified after your confrontation forced her to invoke her professional authority." Bradford's face paled slightly. "Our dispute with her has nothing to do with any mechanical issues." "On the contrary," Friedman countered. "Had you not demanded her seat, had our crew not attempted to force her to move, had Captain Wilson not threatened her with removal, she would have remained simply a passenger. The safety issue would still have existed, but it would have been discovered through normal channels, not in the middle of a public confrontation that has now cost this airline millions of dollars and immeasurable reputational damage." He closed the folder with a decisive snap. "So, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, due to your disruptive and verbally abusive behavior towards another passenger and our flight crew, which directly led to a series of events culminating in a federal safety action, Horizon Airlines is terminating its relationship with you." Bradford's jaw dropped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your Diamond Elite Plus status is revoked effective immediately. You are being placed on our permanent no-fly list. Your tickets will be refunded." Friedman stood up. Now I suggest you find another way to get to London. Security will escort you out of the terminal. Bradford was apoplectic. You can't do that. I'm a million-miler. I'll sue you. I'll sue the airline. I'll... Feel free, Friedman said tiredly. You can explain to your lawyers and the press why you chose to harass a senior FAA official. I'm sure it will make for a fascinating case. The mention of the FAA shut Bradford up instantly. The implications, legal, social, and professional, crashed down on him. This wasn't just about a seat or a canceled flight anymore. This was about his reputation, his business, perhaps even his freedom if federal intimidation charges were pursued. Friedman opened the door where 2 security officers were waiting. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Thompson to ground transportation. As they were led away, Elaine turned back, tears of fury in her eyes. This isn't over. Actually, Mrs. Thompson, Friedman replied, it is. The Horizon Airlines Operations Center at JFK resembled a war room in crisis. Screens displayed the status of each aircraft passenger manifests and rebooking options. Phone lines rang incessantly as staff worked to mitigate the growing disaster. In the center of this controlled chaos stood Dr. Imani Bridges, now fully in her professional capacity. Her posture was straight, her expression serious but not unkind. Around her clustered a group of airline executives and FAA colleagues who had rushed to the scene upon receiving her alert. To be clear, Imani explained, pointing to the maintenance documentation spread across the table. This isn't just about a missing signature. It's about what that represents a breakdown in the safety culture. The work was done correctly, but the verification process failed. And when verification fails, we have no way to ensure that future, more critical work will be properly checked. Sir. Laura Phillips, the operations director who had flown in from headquarters, nodded grimly. We understand, Dr. Bridges. We're not disputing the ground stop. We just need to know what we can do to lift it as quickly as possible. Imani appreciated the directness. Unlike Captain Wilson or the Thompsons, Phillips wasn't trying to circumvent protocol or leverage status. She was acknowledging the problem and seeking a solution. Here's what I need, Imani said, handing Phillips a document. A full audit of all maintenance actions on your 787 fleet at JFK for the past 48 hours. Verification that all ADs have been properly complied with, including dual signatures where required. A comprehensive review of your maintenance release procedures. And, she paused, choosing her next words carefully, a thorough investigation into the customer service incident that occurred on Flight 842 with appropriate disciplinary actions for all involved. Phillips raised an eyebrow at the last item. That seems outside the scope of an airworthiness issue, Dr. Bridges. It would be, Imani agreed, if Captain Wilson hadn't invoked FAA regulations to threaten me. The moment he did that, he made it a regulatory matter. His willingness to misuse safety protocols for customer service issues calls into question his judgment on all safety matters. Phillips couldn't argue with the logic. Understood. We'll include that in our response. One of the maintenance supervisors approached with a tablet. Dr. Bridges, we've completed the initial review of the aircraft in question. The actuator work was performed correctly, but as you noted, the secondary verification signature was missing. We've located Supervisor Daniels, who has now inspected the work and provided the required signature. Imani nodded. That's a start, but it doesn't address the underlying issue. How was this aircraft cleared for service without that signature? Who overrode the safety protocols? The supervisor looked uncomfortable. It appears lead mechanic Rodriguez authorized the override. He's prepared to take full responsibility. I'd like to speak with him, Imani said. Of course. He's waiting in the maintenance office. As they prepared to leave, David Friedman approached looking considerably more subdued than earlier. Dr. Bridges, I wanted to inform you that the Thompsons have been removed from the airport and permanently banned from flying with Horizon. Imani's expression didn't change. That's an internal matter for your airline, Mr. Friedman. My concern is regulatory compliance. Of course. Friedman nodded quickly. I just wanted you to know that we're taking this entire situation very seriously. Taking it seriously would have meant not creating the situation in the first place, Imani replied. But I appreciate the follow-through. She turned back to Phillips. I need to complete my inspection of the maintenance facility. Once I've spoken with Rodriguez and verified the status of the other aircraft, I'll determine next steps regarding the ground stop. How long do you anticipate that will take? Phillips asked. As long as necessary to ensure passenger safety, Imani answered. Not a minute less. As she gathered her materials, Imani caught sight of her reflection in a darkened monitor. The woman looking back at her wasn't just Dr. Bridges, the passenger, anymore. She was the full embodiment of the regulatory authority vested in her by the federal government. It wasn't a role she had sought out today, but it was one she would fulfill with absolute integrity. Because in the end, this wasn't about a seat or about personal dignity, though both mattered. It was about something far more fundamental, the safety of every person who placed their trust in the complex, interconnected system of modern aviation. And that was a responsibility Imani would never take lightly, no matter how she was treated. The process of deplaning a canceled flight is a miserable affair under the best of circumstances. For the passengers of Horizon Airlines Flight 842, it was a surreal experience. As they filed out, many cast curious or stunned glances at the calm woman in Seat 2A who now stood waiting patiently in the aisle. The story in its various mutated forms had spread completely through the cabin. She was an undercover fed a safety czar, a secret shopper with the power to cancel flights. Whatever the specifics, the truth was clear: she had been provoked, and the consequences had been biblical. Miguel Reyes, the Hispanic businessman who had watched the entire confrontation from row 4, deliberately slowed as he passed Imani. Dr. Bridges, he said, quietly extending his hand. Miguel Reyes, Quantum Systems. I just wanted to say, well, that was something to witness. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Imani shook his hand. Thank you, Mr. Reyes, but you were under no obligation to involve yourself. Weren't we all, though? He replied thoughtfully. When we see something wrong and stay silent. Before she could respond, an elderly woman approached from behind Miguel. Young lady, she said firmly, I want you to know that I've been flying for 60 years, and I have never seen anyone handle themselves with such dignity under pressure. They should be ashamed of how they treated you. Thank you, ma'am, Imani said, genuinely touched by the woman's support. As passengers continued to deplane, the reactions were mixed but telling. Some looked annoyed, focusing only on their disrupted travel plans. Others seemed embarrassed, having witnessed the discrimination but done nothing. A few nodded respectfully to Imani, silently acknowledging her victory. And a small number looked openly resentful, clearly feeling that she had overreacted to a simple request to move seats. Jennifer Hudson, the flight attendant who had first confronted Imani, was nowhere to be seen. She had been quickly removed from the aircraft once the gravity of the situation became clear. Captain Wilson remained in the cockpit, avoiding the passenger exodus entirely, a final act of cowardice that did not go unnoticed by the crew. Sofia Alvarez, the attendant who had treated Imani with respect from the beginning, approached as the cabin emptied. Dr. Bridges, she said softly, I just wanted to apologize for what happened. Not all of us at Horizon are like that. Imani regarded her thoughtfully. I know that, Sophia. You treated me with respect from the start. That matters. What will happen now? Sophia asked. To the airline, I mean. That depends on what my investigation finds, Imani replied honestly. If this was an isolated incident, both the maintenance lapse and the discriminatory treatment, then the consequences will be limited. If I find patterns of either, well, that would be more serious. Sophia nodded, understanding the implications. For what it's worth, I've worked here 5 years and there are good people trying to do the right thing. But there's also a culture with some of the older staff, the way they treat certain passengers differently. That's valuable information, Imani said, making a mental note to include it in her report. Thank you for your candor. As the final passengers deplaned, First Officer Nathan Garcia emerged from the cockpit. He approached Imani with a professional demeanor. Dr. Bridges, I'm First Officer Garcia. I want to apologize for what occurred today. It was unprofessional and unacceptable. Imani studied him carefully. Were you part of the decision to threaten me with removal, First Officer Garcia? No, ma'am, he replied firmly. I disagreed with the captain's approach, but I didn't speak up as I should have. That's on me. His honesty was refreshing. I appreciate your integrity in acknowledging that, Imani said. It will be noted in my report. Garcia nodded, then hesitated. Dr. Bridges, many of us became pilots because we believe in aviation safety above all else. What happened today, it's not what we stand for. I hope that's true, Imani replied. Because safety culture isn't built on signatures and checklists alone. It's built on integrity. And integrity means treating everyone, whether they're a federal inspector or a first-time flyer, with the same respect and care you'd want for your own family. Garcia absorbed her words, then nodded again more deeply this time. You've given us all something to reflect on. Thank you. As Imani finally exited the aircraft, she couldn't help but feel a profound weariness settling into her bones. This wasn't how she had planned to start her journey to London. She had simply wanted to sit in her assigned seat, review her presentation, and perhaps get some rest before her keynote address. Instead, she had been thrust into a confrontation that laid bare the ugly realities still present in supposedly elite spaces. She had been forced to invoke her professional authority to protect her personal dignity. And now an airline was facing millions in losses, careers were in jeopardy, and her own carefully planned schedule was in disarray. All because 2 people had looked at her and decided she didn't belong. The private office at the far end of Horizon Airlines' administrative suite at JFK had been hastily converted into a meeting room. Dr. Imani Bridges sat at one end of the conference table, her notes and reports neatly arranged before her. Across from her sat Vincent Parker, the airline's CEO, who had flown in on the corporate jet specifically for this meeting. Flanking him were Laura Phillips, the operations director, and Eleanor Vega, the chief legal officer. Their faces were grave, their postures stiff with the knowledge of just how much was at stake. Dr. Bridges, Parker began, his voice measured and respectful. First and foremost, I want to offer my personal apology for what you experienced today. It was inexcusable, and it represents a failure at every level of our organization. Imani acknowledged his words with a slight nod, but remained silent, waiting for substance rather than contrition. We have taken immediate action, Parker continued. Captain Wilson and Flight Attendant Hudson have been suspended pending a full investigation. Station Manager Friedman has already removed the Thompsons from our frequent flyer program and placed them on our no-fly list. Lead Mechanic Rodriguez has been reassigned to non-safety critical duties until we complete our maintenance procedure review. Those are personnel actions, Imani noted. What about the underlying issues? Parker exchanged glances with Phillips. We've initiated a comprehensive audit of our maintenance procedures at all stations, not just JFK. We're revamping our AD compliance protocols to include triple verification for all safety-critical components. And we're implementing a new training program for all customer-facing staff specifically addressing unconscious bias and discriminatory behavior. That's a start, Imani said. But training programs are meaningless without accountability. What mechanisms are you putting in place to ensure this doesn't happen again? Eleanor Vega leaned forward. We're establishing an independent oversight committee to review all customer complaints involving potential discrimination. We're also implementing a zero-tolerance policy for staff who exhibit biased behavior. One verified incident will result in immediate termination. Imani considered this. And who will sit on this oversight committee? Will it reflect the diversity of your passenger base? It will, Vega assured her. We're recruiting members from various civil rights organizations, customer advocacy groups, and industry experts. We want perspectives that challenge our institutional blind spots. Imani nodded, satisfied with this approach. Now about the maintenance issues. Phillips took over. We've completed the initial audit of all 787s at JFK. 3 additional aircraft had minor documentation discrepancies, though none as serious as the missing AD verification. All have been corrected and verified by our quality assurance team. I'll need to review those findings personally, Imani said. Of course, Phillips agreed. We've prepared a complete file for your review. Once you're satisfied, we hope you'll consider lifting the ground stop order. Imani tapped her pen thoughtfully on the table. I'll make that determination after I've examined the evidence. Now there's the matter of my travel to London. The Global Aerospace Safety Symposium begins tomorrow morning. I'm scheduled to deliver the keynote address. Parker straightened. We're prepared to offer you any available flight to London on any airline, all expenses covered, of course. Or... He hesitated, then continued. We have our corporate jet currently standing by at Teterboro. It could have you in London with time to spare. Imani raised an eyebrow. A private jet? It's the least we can do, Parker said. It was already here for my use, but getting you to your conference takes priority. Imani sat back, considering the offer. A private jet was an extravagant, almost absurd gesture. It was also a desperate act of damage control and a profound signal of how drastically her status had changed in their eyes. She had been deemed unworthy of Seat 2A. Now they were offering her an entire plane. The irony wasn't lost on her. Neither was the ethical complexity. Mr. Parker, she said finally, I appreciate the offer, but I need to be absolutely clear. Nothing you provide me will influence my regulatory decisions. The ground stop will remain in effect until I'm satisfied that all safety issues have been properly addressed. Understood completely, Parker assured her. This isn't a quid pro quo. It's simply an acknowledgement that our failures disrupted your important professional obligations. Imani considered a moment longer, then made her decision. I accept your offer of transportation to London, not because I'm owed special treatment, but because my presence at the symposium serves the broader mission of aviation safety. Parker visibly relaxed. Thank you, Dr. Bridges. The jet will be ready whenever you are. One more thing, Imani added. I'll be filing a complete report on today's events with the FAA. That will include both the maintenance issues and the discriminatory treatment I experienced. Your response today is encouraging, but it doesn't erase what happened. We understand, Vega said. We'll cooperate fully with any investigation. As the meeting concluded, Parker offered one final observation. Dr. Bridges, if I may say so, you've handled this situation with remarkable professionalism. Many in your position might have been more punitive. Imani gathered her materials, meeting his gaze directly. Mr. Parker, my job isn't to punish airlines. It's to protect passengers. If your response helps achieve that goal, then we're aligned. But make no mistake, I will be watching Horizon very closely from now on. Today's incident may have begun with a seating dispute, but it revealed serious flaws in your organization's culture. How you address those flaws will determine whether this is a turning point or merely a temporary correction. With those words, she rose and left the room, leaving the executives to contemplate the narrow escape they'd just been granted and the hard work that lay ahead. The Gulfstream G650 was an ethereal world of cream leather and polished burr walnut. As it climbed through the clouds, leaving the lights of New York City scattered like jewels below, Dr. Imani Bridges finally allowed herself to relax. The deafening roar of the 787's engines was replaced by the whisper-quiet hum of the private jet. A single flight attendant, professional and discreet, had offered her a glass of champagne, the very same brand served in Horizon's first class. This time she accepted. She took a small, thoughtful sip. The bubbles tingled on her tongue. This was not a victory. She felt no joy, no smug satisfaction at the downfall of the Thompsons Hudson or Captain Wilson. Their fates were the unfortunate but necessary byproducts of a system being forced to correct itself. What she felt was a profound sense of exhaustion and a familiar, lingering sadness. Her phone buzzed with an incoming video call. It was Nia, her daughter. Imani took a deep breath, centering herself before answering. She didn't want Nia to see the weariness in her eyes. "Mom." Nia's bright face filled the screen, her MIT dorm room visible in the background. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you okay? Your flight should have landed by now." "There was a change of plans," Imani replied, adjusting the camera angle to reveal the luxurious cabin. "I'm on a different flight." Nia's eyes widened. "Is that a private jet? What happened?" Imani hesitated, then decided her daughter deserved the truth. Nia was no stranger to the realities that black professionals faced. "There was an incident on my original flight. A couple tried to take my seat. When I refused to move, the situation escalated until I had to identify myself as an FAA inspector." "Oh, Mom." Nia's expression fell. "Again, it's always, 'You're in my seat,' or 'Are you in the right section?'" "This time was different," Imani continued. "During the confrontation, I noticed a safety violation that should have grounded the plane. When I pointed it out, they had no choice but to take me seriously. I had to issue a formal ground stop order." "You grounded their plane?" Nia's face broke into an incredulous smile. "That's... wow. Epic." Imani couldn't help but smile at her daughter's reaction. "It wasn't about revenge, Nia. It was about doing my job. The safety violation was real." "I know, Mom. You've always put safety first. But still, they tried to bully you and you shut down their entire operation. There's a certain justice in that." Imani considered this. Perhaps there was. Not justice she had sought, but justice nonetheless. "The airline CEO offered this jet to get me to London for my speech tomorrow," she explained. "I accepted because the symposium is important." "As you should," Nia said firmly. "They're lucky you're not suing them." "That's not my style," Imani replied. "I know," Nia said, her expression softening. "That's what makes you so amazing. You fight the battles that matter, not the ones that just make noise." She paused, then added, "Your story inspired me today. When my engineering professor kept ignoring my raised hand, I stayed after class and told him directly that I deserved the same attention as the male students. He actually apologized." Pride swelled in Imani's chest. "Good for you, honey. I learned it from you, Mom. You taught me that dignity isn't given. Sometimes it has to be claimed." Nia glanced at something off-screen. "I have to run to lab, but I just wanted to check on you. Call me after your keynote." "I will. Love you, sweetheart." "Love you too, Mom." "And I'm proud of you." As the call ended, Imani gazed out the window at the vast Atlantic below. Her job was a lonely one. She lived in a world of regulations and schematics, of metal fatigue and stress tolerances. She was a guardian at the gate charged with preventing the unthinkable. Most days, her work was anonymous, a signature on a form and email to a compliance officer. Today, her work had become brutally, publicly personal. She hadn't wanted to reveal herself. She hadn't wanted to ground the flight. She had boarded Flight 842 as a private citizen, a tired woman named Imani, who just wanted to get to her destination. But they hadn't allowed her that dignity. In their eyes, she was not a doctor, not an engineer, not a person with a valid ticket. She was a problem to be managed, an anomaly to be removed from their pristine, exclusive world. They had stripped away her identity as a passenger, leaving her with only one identity left to claim, that of a federal regulator. And she had done so. Looking out the window at the endless expanse of the darkening Atlantic, she reflected on the irony of it all. The Thompsons, in their desperate grasp for a few square feet of perceived superiority, had lost so much more. Captain Wilson, in his arrogant abuse of authority, had his own authority stripped away. Hudson, in her blind deference to wealth and her casual dismissal of a person who didn't fit her worldview, had lost her livelihood. They had all been playing a game of status, a game Imani had no interest in, but one whose rules she ultimately controlled. Her phone buzzed again. It was an email from the head of the FAA. Imani just read your preliminary report from JFK. Unbelievable. Good work. Let me know what you need for the full audit. The NTSB is already opening an inquiry based on your findings. She typed a quick reply outlining her initial requirements for the investigation. It would be a long week. The conference in London suddenly seemed like a secondary concern. She was now at the center of a major federal investigation that would send shockwaves through Horizon Airlines and likely the entire airline industry. The jet leveled off at its cruising altitude, a silver dart in the deep blue twilight. The flight attendant brought her a light meal on fine china. Imani ate, looking out at the curve of the earth, a solitary figure suspended between two continents. She had been denied a seat she had paid for and in response had been given a private sky. It was a strange, disorienting form of justice. She didn't want the private jet. She didn't want the apologies or the fawning attention. All she had ever wanted was seat 2A. All she had ever wanted was to be treated with the simple, basic respect afforded to any other passenger, to be seen not as a color or a gender, but as a person who belonged. As the plane sped eastward toward the dawn, she knew this fight was far from over. It wasn't about one flight, one couple, or one crew. It was about the pervasive biases that still existed in the most modern and sophisticated of worlds. And as she closed her eyes seeking the rest that had been so rudely denied to her, Dr. Imani Bridges knew with a certainty as solid as the airframe carrying her through the sky that she would be ready for the next battle. Because that, too, was her job. 6 months later, the auditorium of the Federal Aviation Administration's Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center in Oklahoma City was filled to capacity. Aviation professionals from around the world had gathered for the unveiling of the new Global Passenger Rights and Safety Integration Initiative. At the podium stood Dr. Imani Bridges, now the newly appointed director of the FAA's Office of Accountability and Inclusion, a position created in the wake of what had become known throughout the industry as the Horizon Incident. Safety and dignity are not separate considerations, Imani said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. They are interlocking components of the same system. When we allow bias to influence our treatment of any passenger, we create blind spots that can compromise our safety culture as a whole. In the front row sat Vincent Parker, CEO of Horizon Airlines, alongside his newly diverse executive team. The airline had undergone a radical transformation in the months following the incident. Their comprehensive response, which had become a case study in crisis management, included a complete overhaul of their maintenance verification procedures, the implementation of an industry-leading anti-bias training program, the establishment of a passenger dignity guarantee with real financial penalties for violations, the creation of a diverse oversight board with actual enforcement power. The changes hadn't come cheap. Horizon had lost an estimated $42 million due to the initial grounding and subsequent operational adjustments. But they had gained something far more valuable, a reputation as the airline that had faced its failures honestly and emerged stronger. Captain James Wilson had not been as fortunate. After a thorough investigation, he had been demoted to simulator instructor, never to command a commercial flight again. Jennifer Hudson had been terminated and had left the aviation industry entirely. Both had become cautionary tales in training seminars across the globe. The Thompsons had faced their own reckoning. Bradford's behavior had become public when a passenger's cell phone video went viral. The publicity had cost him several key clients and a position on a prestigious corporate board. Their social standing, once unassailable, had crumbled under the weight of their exposed prejudice. But the most profound changes were structural. The FAA had used the incident to launch a broad investigation into how passenger treatment intersected with safety culture. They discovered what many minority travelers had known for years. Discrimination wasn't just a customer service issue. It reflected deeper problems in organizational culture that often manifested in safety practices as well. Today, Imani continued, we're unveiling new regulatory guidelines that explicitly connect passenger dignity with safety compliance. Airlines will now be required to demonstrate how their customer service practices support, rather than undermine, their safety culture. She paused, surveying the room. Some will say these changes go too far, that we're conflating separate issues. To them I say this: there is nothing separate about human dignity. When we allow ourselves to see certain passengers as less deserving of respect, we create permission for cutting corners elsewhere. Excellence cannot exist alongside exclusion. The room erupted in applause. Among those clapping the loudest was Anthony Rodriguez, the former lead mechanic who had missed the critical signature that day. Rather than becoming a scapegoat, Rodriguez had been invited to join the FAA's new Safety Culture Advisory Board, where his frontline experience proved invaluable in reshaping maintenance protocols. After the presentation, as attendees mingled during the reception, Vincent Parker approached Imani. "Dr. Bridges," he said, extending his hand. "Remarkable presentation. You've fundamentally changed how we approach our entire operation." Imani accepted the handshake. "Change only matters if it's sustained, Mr. Parker. The real test will be where Horizon stands 5 years from now, not 6 months." Parker nodded soberly. "Fair enough. But I want you to know that what happened that day, as painful as it was for all involved, may have been the most important wake-up call our company ever received." "Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal the truth," Imani observed. "Indeed," Parker agreed. "By the way, I thought you'd like to know that Sofia Alvarez has been promoted to our new passenger advocacy team. Her insight has been invaluable." Imani smiled genuinely. "That's excellent news. She demonstrated real character that day." As Parker moved on to greet other attendees, Imani felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find a young black woman in a Horizon Airlines first officer uniform. "Dr. Bridges, I'm First Officer Tasha Williams. I just wanted to thank you personally. Your stand that day made a difference for all of us." "How so?" Imani asked, intrigued. "Before the incident, there were subtle ways we were made to feel like guests in our own industry," Williams explained. "The little comments, the surprised looks when I walk into the cockpit, the passengers who would ask to verify my credentials. Since your story went public, there's been a shift. Not perfect, but noticeable. People think twice now before assuming we don't belong." Imani was touched. This ripple effect of dignity reclaimed meant more to her than any regulatory change or professional advancement. "Thank you for telling me that, First Officer Williams. It matters." After the reception, as Imani gathered her materials, her phone rang. It was Nia. "Mom, I just watched the live stream of your speech. You were amazing. Thank you, sweetheart. How are things at MIT?" "Great. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I just got selected for the aerospace internship at NASA, the one I really wanted. Nia, that's wonderful. Congratulations. And guess what? The project director mentioned you. Said your work on the new safety integration guidelines inspired part of their program. You're literally changing things, Mom." As Imani ended the call and walked toward her waiting car, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. A lightness, a sense that perhaps the battles she had fought had created openings for others to walk through with just a bit more ease. She thought back to that day on Flight 842, to the moment when she'd been forced to choose between submitting to injustice or standing her ground. It had been one small moment in one woman's life, a dispute over a seat in a metal tube hurtling through the sky. But in that moment, by refusing to be moved, she had set something much larger in motion. The familiar hum of jet engines filled the cabin as Horizon Airlines Flight 127 prepared for departure. Dr. Imani Bridges sat in seat 2A. Her briefcase stowed neatly beneath the seat in front of her, her tablet open to review notes for her upcoming presentation in Chicago. So much had changed in the 6 months since the incident, as it had come to be known throughout the aviation industry. The story had made national headlines, spawned congressional hearings on airline safety culture, and transformed Horizon Airlines from an industry laggard in diversity and inclusion to a reluctant leader. "Dr. Bridges," a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" Imani looked up to see a young black flight attendant with a name tag reading Taylor. There was a hint of recognition and respect in the woman's eyes. "Just water, thank you," Imani replied with a smile. As Taylor poured the water, she spoke quietly. "I just wanted to say thank you. What you did changed things for a lot of us. The airline's different now." Before Imani could respond, a commotion arose a few rows back. A familiar scene was unfolding. A passenger was disputing a seating assignment with another passenger and a flight attendant. Imani watched as the chief purser approached quickly. Unlike Captain Wilson, months before, this crew member pulled out a tablet, checked both passengers' reservations thoroughly, and then found an equitable solution that required neither passenger to downgrade. The situation was resolved in minutes with professionalism and respect. No threats, no assumptions, no invocation of status or privilege. Taylor returned with Imani's water. "See what I mean?" she said with a knowing smile. "The Bridges Protocol, we call it. Check the facts, respect the booking, find a solution that maintains everyone's dignity." "The Bridges Protocol," Imani repeated, surprised and touched. "I had no idea." "It's not just Horizon either," Taylor continued. "The incident report you filed became required reading at flight attendant training programs across the industry. You showed everyone that respect and safety aren't separate issues, they're part of the same standard of excellence." As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Imani gazed out the window at the airport operations unfolding below. Her confrontation with the Thompsons and Captain Wilson hadn't been about winning or losing. It had been about standing firm in the face of injustice and insisting that rules matter, all rules, whether they governed hydraulic actuators or human dignity. Sometimes a single person refusing to be moved could change an entire system. She settled back in her seat 2A, the one she had rightfully booked as the aircraft began its journey skyward. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with a new awareness, a careful attention to treating each passenger with equal respect. And in that moment, watching the earth fall away beneath powerful wings built to exacting safety standards, Dr. Imani Bridges finally felt something she had been seeking since that fateful day 6 months ago. The quiet satisfaction of a job well done, a battle properly fought, and a world ever so slightly better than it had been before. Because some victories aren't measured in dramatic confrontations or public vindication. They're measured in small, everyday moments when people are treated with the dignity they deserve. In flight attendants who check facts before making assumptions, in maintenance logs properly signed and verified, in systems that work as they should, in a woman sitting undisturbed in seat 2A exactly where she belongs. If you were inspired by Dr. Imani Bridges' story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of justice, dignity, and everyday heroes who refuse to be silenced. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes standing your ground can change not just your own journey, but create a path for others to follow. Drop a comment below about a time when you or someone you know stood firm in the face of injustice. Remember, real change often begins with one person refusing to be moved from their rightful place.